Hi, this is Brass Check, and I'm recording this on Friday, November 28th, the day after American Thanksgiving. And this is a video about the Charlie Kirk case. And I want to go over some old ground and then go over some very new ground that nobody else seems to be covering. Really important ground. This case, and it's tragic for the man, obviously, lost his life, and for his children, and I presume for his wife and family and his colleagues. Um, but it has the potential to open a portal of understanding into the various power players in American politics. And this opportunity so far has been missed. So we're gonna we're gonna close the gaps here. But first, just for people that may just be watching me for the first time on this subject, 4 days after the assassination, I got onto a podcast. I could have been on earlier, but took 4 days. And I pointed out the following. Number one, the shot could not have come from where the FBI said it came from. Okay. I made it and I explained exactly why. It's a very simple answer. Um, so that was handled. Number two, I pointed out that um, Turning Point USA is not just Charlie Kirk going from campus to campus debating with students. It is a vast organization. People are talking about that now, weeks and months later. Nobody was talking about it right after the shooting. All right. Number three, I pointed out as a corollary to that that there's no way Charlie Kirk was running the organization or even knew what was going on with the organization. You can hide a lot of chicanery in a 600 person, $80 million a year organization. I, and that's people are catching up to now, weeks and months later. I also pointed out what some of that, the form some of that chicanery probably would have taken. Not saying that I didn't know what was going on, but once I heard 600 employees, $80 million a year budget, and Charlie Kirk flying from city to city, I knew that there was a whole vast network of people behind the scenes. And I pointed out the ways that they could be siphoning off money. And again, months later, we're starting to see shows where people are getting into the details of that. But what's been missing is the Christian connection. And this is really important. First, I want to say that all religions have their bright side and their dark side. Okay. So looking at the Nazi Zionists, these are people that have hijacked Judaism, claim to represent all Jews, and are now engaged in a mass genocide of men, women, and children. We don't know how many people they've killed. It's got to be over 100,000. It may be multiples now. We don't know. But they've also completely destroyed the infrastructure of a small country, which was the Gaza territory. And they've wrapped themselves in the Star of David and claim they're Jews. They are no such thing. They are psychopaths, really, and their psychopathy takes the form of Jewish supremacy, supremism. All right. In their mind, Jews are the only people of value. Everyone else can be murdered. By the way, that includes American servicemen, USS Liberty. If you don't know that story, 1967, look it up. So this is the dark and sick side of religion. And it's not really religion itself. It's con artists posing as religionists. We see the same thing in Islam. All right, the vast, overwhelming majority of Muslim people are devout, friendly. I've traveled in Muslim countries, love it, would go back anytime. But then you have the extremists and the supremacists who believe that everybody must be Muslim, or only Muslims have value. And that's the same thing with the Zionists. Only Jewish people have value. Neither of these groups represent the religion. That makes sense? Well, we have the same thing in Christianity. And I'm shocked that nobody talks about this. We have Christian supremacists, and sometimes they're called right-wing Christians or Christian nationalists, but they are basically Christian supremacists, which means they're not Christians because there's nothing anywhere in the New Testament talking about Christian supremacy, right? So so we have to make these distinctions. And here's the problem: when you just simply say, "Oh, Christian nationalists or Christian fundamentalists," or it's not precise enough, and it's in the lack of precision that confusion reigns. And so we got to get real precise. So just to recap, because it's so important. I'm not talking about all Christians here, okay? I'm talking about a narrow slice of Christians. Just as I never talk about Jews. That's too broad a concept. Um, I was talking, I've been talking about Jewish supremacists, the Zionists who've proven themselves to be equal to or worse than the Nazis. Uh, and then, of course, we already have our national leaders always teaching us to be afraid of Muslims, which is insane. I think I have to say, if I had to be somewhere where I felt perfectly safe and I had to choose between a Christian country and a Zionist country and a Muslim country, I think I've traveled, I've traveled the world, guys. Um, uh, I would at least equally feel as safe in a Muslim country. But anyway, let's get down to the dark side of Christianity. All right. So I have notes here because this is involved, and I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. So if I look down, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking down at notes. Okay. America changed the practice of Christianity, or let me put it this way: within America, there was a certain group of people within America who call themselves Christians, engaged in a radical transformation, change, uh, transmorphication. I don't know what words you want to use. Some would say perversion of Christianity. I'm going to do something that I never do, which is just read to you. And I'm reading to you because this is complicated, and to create a perfectly smooth and wonderful spontaneous talk would take weeks. I don't have weeks. I'm working on a totally different book. But since nobody else is covering this, um, I got to cover it. All right. So, the history of religious conversion experience in U.S. evangelism. Okay. The idea that a Christian must have a personal, dramatic, identifiable conversion experience, often described as being born again, is not a timeless Christian doctrine. Okay? This does not go back to Judea or wherever Jesus lived. Okay? This is something that was developed in the United States in the last couple of centuries. It developed historically, and in the US, it's become one of the most powerful organizing principles of evangelical culture. So when people who are not involved in Christianity and are talking about Christianity, very often in America, they're thinking about these evangelical people. Okay. And so we need to know and understand that this is a new development. Just as Zionism is a new development in Judaism, evangelism is a new development in Christianity. All right. So, like all things that went off the rails in our country, it began with the Puritans. They believed in intense self-examination. They believed in signs. Oh, he's obviously selected because he's doing well. Um, but they didn't require sudden conversion. They believed in gradual awakening, which is a little more realistic. And they believed that the whole thing was a lifelong struggle, right? Which I think is reasonable. You know, you don't solve everything in one day and you're done for the rest of your life. That makes no sense unless you're evangelical. They believe in one single moment being the big deal. So then we had in the 1730s to 1740s, we had the birth of the dramatic conversion experience. All right. And that involved people like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, Gilbert Tennant. This was new. Okay. This is where they promoted, made super emotional appeals. And listeners were explicitly encouraged to have sudden, intense, identifiable encounters with the Holy Spirit. Again, there's no tradition of this in actual Christianity. This is something this is a cultural artifact of 18th century America. And these things had to be manifest. You had to weep, you had to shake, you had to collapse. And these were signs that you were having a conversion. Now, interestingly enough, they do the same thing in voodoo, right? And they do the same thing in Santeria. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with any of this. Okay, but to call it Christianity, it's debatable. And in those religious traditions, they play music, they dance, they chant for hours and hours until people start going off. That functionally, there's no difference between voodoo, Santeria, and evangelical. I don't know how to say this word. Evangelicalism. I can't say it. Um, so under the Jonathan Edwards regime, pastors began to record these conversion narratives. Oh, I saw Jesus, all that kind of stuff. And then they would use these testimonies as evidence of authentic faith. So unless you had one of these wild experiences, you weren't really a Christian. This was never part of Christianity. Never. They also encouraged people to stand up and declare that they were saved. So this made the conversion experience, which is part and parcel of the religious experience, nothing wrong with it, but it made it the norm. And it made it a norm that you had to adhere to. You had to have a conversion experience. You had to weep. You had to throw yourself on the ground. You had to see the bright lights. Otherwise, you weren't a real Christian. This was never part of the Christian tradition. All right, then that cooled down for a while. And between the 1800 and the 1840s, there was this systemization of conversion as a formal practice. Okay. So the guy that pushed this was a fellow named Charles Grandison Finney. And he would this was the beginning of revivals, the revival experience. And he would create in his meetings this intense emotional um, um, uh, atmosphere. And then he'd pressure people, come forward, choose salvation, show that, you've accepted Jesus Christ as your, and he dramatized the whole thing. Okay. This was not part of Christianity until this fellow came along. Okay. This is not a multi-thousand year tradition. This is a tradition that started in the United States and is only a couple of hundred years old. So in this case, conversion wasn't a natural outflowing of religious experience. It was a decision. You just decided that you convert and you do it super publicly, and ministers and pastors could create an emotional environment to stimulate people to come forward and declare and do all these kinds of things. Pastors became technicians of religious experience. Instead of leaders, instead of teachers, instead of counselors, they became engineers of emotional experiences that they claimed were an expression of Christianity. Okay. Now, after the Civil War, things got modern, and professional evangelists became prevalent, and the system of getting people to testify um, was standardized. And the two key figures in that arena were a guy named Dwight Moody and Ira Sankey. And the it, everything had been leading to this, but during the post-Civil War era, the whole thing, every religious service, it wasn't a one-off occasionally. It was now every service, every single service had one goal, all right? And that was to get people to raise their hands, come up to the stage, uh, give their testimony, and then because it's the modern era, the pastors were there counting. How many did we have? How this week? How many did we have last week? And this became a metric for religious success. Not how good people were becoming, not how comfortable they were with their lives and their neighbors, and not becoming good fathers, good mothers, good neighbors, good community members. No, it was, did you have one of these wild ass emotional experiences in church? Okay. Again, nothing wrong with that. Um, but when you start juicing it and counting it and making that your sole metric of Christianity, I'm going to say there's a problem. So conversion became your personal narrative. We see this everywhere now, and it became a public credential. Oh yeah, I'm saved. Here's my savior, my salvation story, and then it became a tool for recruitment. Oh, I was lost and then I was found. Okay, okay, and recruitment a huge deal, obviously. Now, in the early 20th century, that's when we had the formation of fundamentalism, Pentecostalism, born again language. What are the other ones? The charismatic movement, um, and then something called New Apostolic Reform, which we really have to talk about. Pentecostalism started around 1906. The person involved was someone named Azusa Street, and they had this idea of baptism in the Holy Spirit, the speaking of tongues, having specific meetings specifically for healing. Now, healing suddenly became part of the deal. It wasn't just enough to feel the presence of Christ and to give yourself to Jesus and all that. Now you also had to heal. You had to heal yourself. Okay, this was new to the early 20th century. Um, it was already pretty visceral, but it became even more visceral, more emotional, and it became central. As central as it was to some of these earlier guys, it became the core of the religious ceremony. Now, on the fundamentalism side, there was a guy named Billy Sunday, and he was the first guy that mass produced this thing. Previously, you'd go to your church in your town with your pastor and your community, and you would have these experiences. Okay. Well, with Billy Sunday, now we have the radio and mass markets and so on, and he brought that intimate experience and made it a mass media spectacle. Spectacle. So when you are flipping the channel on Sunday and you're seeing all these spectacles, that is not original Christianity. Okay. That was invented in the 20th century and it was derived from these other fellows that I've already told you about. Okay. Um, the whole, and now pastors were being specifically trained to create these emotional climaxes. And there was a whole format. We'll have a little music. And again, this can be done genuinely, authentically. Okay. And then, of course, you have to make a decision to, stand up for Christ. Don't leave the building unsaved, et cetera, et cetera. Give up your sin, highly supercharged emotional experience. All right. Then we had the Rockefeller supported Billy Graham. Yeah, Rockefeller wrote the checks for Billy Graham and got him going. And now, whatever Billy Sunday was doing with the radio, Billy Graham was filling entire stadiums. And again, it all boiled down to that single. It all was geared up to that single climactic altar call: "Come to the altar, give up your sinful ways, be born again." Um, and local pastors looked at this and said, "That looks good. I want some of that." And again, here's what conversion became. Instead of a spontaneous experience that may or may not happen in the course of someone's spiritual development, it became a engineered reaction. It became a repeatable ritual with a measurable outcome. And it became the central marker for all evangelicals. If you're not having people throw themselves on the ground or wail and gnash their teeth and do all this, you're not in the Jesus business. And so all of these within the evangelical community, there's not just the church event, there's summer camps, there's youth groups. Everything is boiled down to creating this conversion. Okay. Now we're into our wonderful 21st century, and now we have the mega church, and the idea of healing has morphed into a therapeutic conversion. And the modern guys, they're using, incredible staging, a lot of investment in emotional worship music, testimonial videos now broadcast on the big screen, um, and sometimes public baptisms and so on. And the idea now of conversion is therapeutic. You're going to heal your emotional problems, your brokenness, your trauma, um, and your healing is evidence of God and evidence of your alignment with God, and it's marketed heavily. And all these experiences are used in the recruitment and the branding and in the growth metrics. Okay. So let and now the churches, how many conversions have we had? How many baptisms? How many rededications? And pastors are trained now formally within the mega church networks to create these spectacles to engineer conversion experiences with precision. That's why I use the word engineer. There's nothing spontaneous or natural about any of this. Let's take this back a bit. What do all authentic religions share in? Okay. What is it? What do they share in? Submission to God. Okay, that's even baked into the word Islam. Submission to God. If you talk to a real rabbi, um, I'm thinking of Jacob Shapiro, the author of The Empty Cart, who's been fighting the abuse of Judaism by these Zionist Nazis. That's what he'll tell you. He'll go, "Oh, Judaism's simple. We're supposed to submit to God, and we submit to God by knowing His laws and by following them. Period. End of story. No need for gnashing of the teeth or rolling in the aisles or speaking in tongues or having a wild, emotional experience. Nothing wrong with that. But that's not the core of this thing. It's submission to God. And it's the same thing with Christianity. The fundament, if you boil it down, there is a God, He has laws. We submit ourselves to God by following His laws. Period. Right. So all this, the stadiums with the multimedia and the orchestras and the big screens and the guy that's been trained to pump people's emotions. This is not Christianity. This is something else. They can call themselves Christian in the same way that Zionists call themselves Jewish, in the same way that a very small percentage of terrorists call themselves Muslims, but that doesn't make them representatives of the faith. All right, so again, let's go through. So everything's become within this one. This is, and by the way, this is not Christianity at large. This is just a slice of Christianity. So how is this conversion spirit experience used to tie everything up? So number one, it's a credentialing, right? Pastors themselves are supposed to have this very clear salvation story, and they were called to stand on the stage in front of 20,000 people and raise millions of dollars in donations, which go we don't know where. And we're going to talk about that later. So if you're going to be a pastor, you have to have had one of these bright light, Jesus came to me, the Holy Spirit came to me experiences. Otherwise, you're not authentic. By the way, this is new. Jesus didn't talk about this. The first 2,000 years or so of Christianity did not talk about this. Okay. Um, you use these conversion stories to create disciples because it proves the power of the doctrine. It's inspiration. Everyone wants to be healed. Everyone wants to feel better. Everyone wants to get out of the difficulties they're in, and we do that through this conversion experience, which involves the music and the lights and all this kind of stuff. Um, there's a ritual to it. There's an altar call. Everybody come up, pray for pray for redemption, and then the public applauds. I mean, they've worked this out very carefully. And they've known, they have calculated, because everything's business in America, that the more conversions you have, the bigger an audience you have, and the bigger an audience you have, the more money you're going to make, and the bigger auditorium you can have. And that's all proof of what? It's proof that you're on the right track. Make sense? Oh, and it's also a great fundraising thing. We've brought Christ to 10 million people in Nigeria. Um, that's not in the Bible. And then it becomes your identity. You're in this evangelical thing. I've been found. I'm with people that I've been saved. I'm with people that have been saved. Everybody else who's not saved, well, my job is to help them get saved somehow. But I have to realize they're not really good. They're not really normal human beings. They're not fulfilled human beings, right? So it's emotionally powerful. It's easily ritualized. It's publicly verifiable. It's contagious, right? Moods are contagious. It's a way to grow a church, and it's a strong identity marker. Okay. So let's talk about this Grandison Finney guy. Um, he industrialized the American conversion experience. He lived from 1792 to 1875. And he started out as a lawyer, which is, an indication that he's already on a wrong track. But then somehow he got involved in religion, and he made this decision that humans can choose their salvation. Okay, under Calvinism, there was a thing called predestination, which I don't get the whole. Once it gets beyond, um, to me, it's that which you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me, right? Once you get beyond that, you've lost me. Okay. I don't know what, predestination, that I'm lost. I only understand that one thing, right? That which you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. Do we need more? But apparently more is needed. Um, so this Finley fellow decided that anybody can choose. You can choose salvation at any moment. It's not a matter of God blessing you now. It's you decide, and it's not a miracle anymore. It's not a consequential outcome of religious training and religious practice. Now it's something you can just wake up and decide, hey, I'm going to be converted, man. So I'll go to the revival and I'll feel the juice. Um, Part of it, and it was all about creating intense emotion. And we're going to long meetings, super emotional preaching, the right kind of music, people coming up and testifying in this collective buildup. And then people are told, you must stand up, you must declare, you must demonstrate, it must be visible. And these were used, this methodology in America of we'll call it conversion. Um, but it's not, we're not talking about religious conversion. We're talking about creating a highly pitched emotional state and then pressuring people into doing a single thing, which is a demonstration of belief. All right. That's what we're talking about here. Again, read the New Testament. I don't see Jesus jumping up and down and with a rock and roll band behind him, and demanding everybody come forward and pledge allegiance. Okay. I'm maybe reading a different Bible. I don't know. That whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. That's the one thing I understand. Everything else I just don't get. But he did not do this. He could have had a band, right? Couldn't have, big video screens. He could have passed, the collection plate. He could have sold, special Bibles for $500. I didn't see him doing that. At least they didn't record it. All right. So in any event, this conversion engine, this conversion technology, let's call it what it is, brainwashing, okay, was used. Everything, knife is, you can use a knife to cut, food and share it with people, or you can use a knife to stab somebody. It's just a tool, okay? And so it has been used profitably, not profitably, productively. It was tied into the abolition movement. It was tied into the temperance movement. It was tied into the women's rights movement. It was tied into the educational reform movement. One could say they might have overshot on some of these things, but basically, um, uh, it was a technology. It was a social psychological technology that has been adapted by many different people. But he was actually attacked. People didn't like people in the mainstream Christian world were not into Finney and his shenanigans. They said he was manipulating the crowd. Well, yeah, he was. That was his business. That he was producing shallow manufactured conversions. That's not me saying this. This is 19th century theologians. Okay. Now here's a big one. He was replacing divine sovereignty with what? With human technique. In other words, instead of however this works, God deciding when it's the right time. No, you're going to decide. You're going to wake up, you're going to look at your clock, you're going to look at the calendar and say, hey, I'm just going to use this technique and I'm going to connect to God in one morning or one afternoon with the help of Pastor Jones, or whatever. Um, and they were against the turning. Here we go. Here's the bottom line. They were against the turning of religion into a psychological spectacle. Okay. Again, I want to repeat this. This is an American phenomenon. It's only a few centuries old. Never before in the history of Christianity was this kind of stuff done, and it certainly doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible. So every modern revival technique comes from this guy Finney, the altar call. Hey, if you feel the Spirit, come to the thing. And then you got to decide to throw off your sinful ways and become one with the Spirit, right? Emotional preaching, the targeted music, the public testimonies, repeated meetings over and over and over again. Revival, not as a spontaneous outcome of dedication to the following the laws of your God, but as a revival, but as a planned event. And conversion, this most private of experiences, as a public ceremony and spectacle. And again, we've got Billy Sunday, we've got Billy Graham, we've got, and then we've got our current mega pastors. And so here's the shift that took place in the United States. And this is all leading somewhere to an important place. Believe me, trust me. He shifted American Christianity from theological predestination to psychological persuasion. So the pastor's going to get up there and he's going to whip you into a frenzy of conversion. It's not about you developing a relationship with God by following the laws as you understand them. And it's not easy to follow some laws, right? Easier to like do what you want to do. But if there are laws and there are laws and you believe there are God's laws and you've got to submit to God, and the way to submit to God is to follow his laws. I mean, that's a lot of work. And that's a daily, hourly thing, right? But hey, no more. You just decide you're going to be saved. You go to one of these events, boom, you're saved and you're healed and everything's grand and you're done. You're part of the elite now. So conversion was turned into a decision. It was turned into, instead of God deciding things, you decide, right? And conversion becomes your decision. It becomes a ritual. You go somewhere and have it done to you. It becomes a story. And most important, it becomes a tool of church expansion. Um, all right. And we're not going to get into Billy Sunday, but he was 1862 to 1935, and he did quite a bit of this. So what we have when people are there's a broad range of Christian experience, right? The ones that we want to focus on vis-a-vis Charlie Kirk and what he was involved in and the forces at play in his assassination. We've already, I talked way back 4 days after the assassination about Israel. Clearly, Ukraine is involved in this, or is implicated. They're a suspect. The people that are promoting the Ukrainian war, because that is a multi-billion-dollar payday for many criminals. And Kirk was starting to make noise that it wasn't a good idea. Right. But there was another thing, and we might as well get to it right now. There was another place where Kirk was causing consternation to people with a lot of money and a lot of power. He was beginning to rock the evangelical boat. Okay. And that, as we're going to see later in this, that evangelical boat is a major power source. Now, if you've studied it or you know people that are in it, you already know that. But if you're looking at all this stuff from third hand and you're just calling people Christian fundamentalists or Christian nationalists, you don't understand the depth of these people's organization, their commitment, and their ideology. And that's what we're going to be talking about very soon. Okay, so now you got the history. And the most important thing to understand about this is Christianity has been around a long time, just as Judaism was around a long time, just as Islam has been around a long time, Buddhism has been around a long time, Hinduism has been around a long time. These things have all been around a long time. And it's only in the last couple of centuries that they were never perfect, okay? They're human enterprises at the end of the day. They were, so they've never been perfect. But it was only in the last couple of hundred years that you had this mechanization, this industrialization of supremacy. So you got the Jewish supremacists, the Nazi Zionists. You have a small percentage of the Muslim population that has a similar idea that only Islam is good and everybody else is a third-rate citizen. And then you have the Christian supremacists, who let's cut to the chase here, and then I'll get we'll go into it in more detail. Their vision, just so you understand, their vision is a quote Christian nation, but Christian according to their terms. Okay. And part of the Christian nation is behaving like the Zionists. It's okay to kill the other. It's okay to dominate the other. It's okay to steal from the other because you are the supremacist. You are the highest form of humanity, and everybody else is second, third, fourth, fifth rate. This is the Zionist mental illness. This is the mental illness of a tiny percentage of the Muslim population. And this is a mental illness that's being fostered in the United States on an industrial scale. That's why you have the linkage between the Zionists and certain people who call themselves Christians. Now, the problem, these people are not a small group, they're not an insignificant group, and they are very focused on getting money and political power. And they're doing a very good job at it, which we're gonna talk about a little bit later. All right, so some definitions that you need to have. Okay, charismatic. All right, I'm just going to read this because it makes it easier. A Christian movement that emphasizes direct personal experience of the Holy Spirit, including gifts such as prophecy, healing, speaking in tongues, and ecstatic worship. Charismatic beliefs can appear inside many denominations, not just fundamentalists. Christians, Catholics can have a charismatic bent. Okay. Again, nothing wrong with any of this. If that's how you want to experience God and religion, have at it. Have at it. But people that go the charismatic route are very vulnerable to manipulation. This is a key thing that's going to come up later in this video. They're primed for manipulation. Like you don't have to, you just blow on them and they're going to fall over. And we're going to talk about that a little later. All right. Now, what about fundamentalism? All right. In the early 20th century, those were Protestants who insisted on strict literal adherence to the essential fundamentals of the faith, including uh, Bible's everything. The Bible's the only thing. There's the virgin birth, there's the physical resurrection, the salvation through Christ alone. These terms have also refer more broadly to socially conservative, theological, strict Christians. Um, so that's what they believe. So, and they call themselves fundamentalists. All right, now there's the third one and this is the key one. This is the big one. This is the one that is slowly eating Christianity in the United States. It's called New Apostolic Reformation. New Apostolic Reformation. I'm going to say that again because every American needs to know what New Apostolic Reformation is. NAR. And believe me, there are many mainstream Christians that are extremely alarmed, and we're going to play the videos of that a little bit later with what these people are saying and doing. But they have the advantage of operating in a sort of a closed system. If you're in that system and you're being indoctrinated by it, you're in it and you're being indoctrinated by it. But if you're outside of it, you don't even know it exists. That's the purpose of this video, to let you know that there are millions of people who are being cultivated to, I don't know. Well, they're being cultivated to accept that this particular thin psychological brand of Christianity is the only form of Christianity that's acceptable. And that the entire nation, and we're going to talk about that, how their exact plan, the entire nation needs to be taken over by this particular brand of Christianity, and it needs to rule. Um, and that includes partnerships with, Nazis, Zionists, and anybody else who is willing to advance this, cooperate with this agenda. So, what is the New Apostolic Reformation? It is a loose but influential modern movement that teaches that God is restoring present day apostles and prophets to govern the church. Okay, so what these people are doing is their pastors are saying, hey, I'm an apostle. Like St. John and St. Peter and all these guys. I'm one of those guys. This is unprecedented in Christian history. Okay. You don't declare yourself an apostle of Jesus. You read the Bible, and you try to adhere to it. But these pastors are telling their flock, I am an apostle. See how, I mean, talk about egotistical, right? Talk about sacrilegious, but their brand of Christianity is based on this. So that's number one. Your pastor is an apostle and he's a prophet. Um, they promote ideas like spiritual warfare, dominionism, which is Christian control over every societal institution. And they also talk about something called the Seven Mountains Mandate. This is very important. You've got to know what the Seven Mountains Mandate is. So this is a large group of people. This is a growing group of people. And again, okay, let's jump straight to this idea of the Seven Mountain Mandate. Okay, this group, which is millions and is growing, and they have a technology to grow, and they have the money to grow, and they're growing in darkness. Nobody, for many, I'm guessing for 99.9% of the viewers right now, you've never heard any of this stuff, or you've heard very little of it. And it's complicated. That's why it's taking so long to explain. I tried to make a short video about it, and there's just no way. But I'm going to show you some clips from that failed video, so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is sort of the theoretical, and then you're going to be able to see with your own eyes what I'm talking about. Okay, so what is the Seven Mountains Mandate? Well, first of all, it's part of the agenda of the New Apostolic Reformation, in which your pastor is a prophet and an apostle. And that, where does that put you? You just got to do whatever you're told because he's the apostle of Jesus, right? This is not good right out the gate. Some human being declaring that they're an apostle of Jesus and therefore they're infallible. That's the other part about it. They're infallible. They're infallible. And whoever they pick politically, this is another big piece, and this will come up in the later. Whoever they align with politically is infallible too. And when I say infallible, I mean infallible. Whatever that political figure wants to do, the flock has to go along with it. Period. Whatever it may be. Killing women and children in Gaza? Hey, no problem. Pastor says it's okay. The apostle, my pastor who's an apostle and a prophet, says it's okay. This is the psychological environment why we have tens of millions of so-called Christians supporting a genocide. Okay, this is where this is coming from. It's not coming from well, I mean, it is coming from ignorance, but it's not coming from thin air. It's engineered, and it's engineered very precisely with a tremendous amount of organization, energy, and money. Okay, so again, you probably haven't heard this phrase, New Apostolic Reformation, NAR. One of the pillars of their program is something called the Seven Hills Mandate. Seven Mountains Mandate, sometimes called the Seven Hills. It teaches that Christianity, specifically the apostolic and prophetic Christians, those are the ones listening to the pastor who's claiming to be a disciple of Jesus, a direct disciple of Jesus. These people believe that they must, as part of a religious imperative, they must take control of the seven major sectors of society to bring God's rule to earth. Okay? Now, here's how it works. We're going to put God as the ruler, but of course, he's not easy to talk to, so it's going to be our pastors who are declaring themselves apostles who are actually going to run the show. Okay, do you see a logical potential problem here? Giving political power to religious figures who are basically bastardizing one of the world's great religions and using it to control their flock. But that's not good enough for them. They need also to control the entirety of society. And what they're doing is they're weaponizing their flock. This is consciously being done at great expense, with great focus, with great organization, and billions of dollars. And so let's go back to Charlie Kirk. So he was starting to make noises about, hey, I don't think it's a good idea to kill people in Palestine. He was starting to go, why are we sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine again? But he was also thinking about becoming a Catholic. Okay. Now, if you're a mainstream Catholic, you go to church, you pray, you have a relationship with a priest who hopefully is a good priest and gives you good advice, and you relate, what I'm saying, you have your Christmas and your Easter and all this kind of stuff. You don't dream of world domination, okay? And you don't throw like the Catholic Church is pretty good at raising money, but the evangelicals and the charismatics, they are the masters of bankrupting human beings. I mean, say what you want about the Catholic Church. They're not in the business of bankrupting mom and pop. Charismatics absolutely are. We're going to show the video of this shortly. I got to sort of do this large intro before when you see these videos, you'll understand what you're seeing. Okay. So, what are the seven mountains that the Christian, let's just call them what they are, Christian supremacists. All right. They call themselves NAR, the New Apostolic Reformation, blah, blah, blah. But that's like it's a good term because it's very hard to wrap your mind around. Therefore, it makes it easy for the people that are running this thing to keep it going. So let's call it what it is, Christian supremacism, just like white supremacism or Jewish supremacism, Zionist Nazis, or anybody. You could be a Buddhist supremacist, you could be a Hindu. I mean, it's all wrong, right? It's all wrong. All right. But these people are Christian supremacists who believe that their brand, their specific narrow brand of Christianity, it's not a religious thing for them. That's just the beginning of it. It is a program for taking over the country. All right. So what are the seven mountains that the Christian supremacists, also known as the NAR, want to take over? Well, they want to take over government, and they're doing a really good job about that. I mean, how many crooked, criminal, psychopathic congressmen and senators we have that, oh, they love Jesus. They love Jesus. They're robbing us blind. They're destroying the country. They're the most corrupt people on two legs, but they love Jesus. And by the way, baked in, I don't know if you remember, if you have to be of a certain age, you would remember the Watergate and all these guys got caught. They all went to prison and they all found Jesus. And then suddenly they were redeemed and everything was okay. Um, it's a good trick, right? So these Christian supremacists believe that they need to take over the government, not influence the government, take over the government, and they're doing it. And we're going to show you the videos about this is a multi-decade process that's been going on, not recently. Goes back at least to the 1930s. A conscious plan to subvert the government. I mean, it's like it's not my imagination or I'm projecting. They say they want to do this. They are working towards it. They have a mechanism to do it. They wake up every morning and they go to work to do it. Okay, so whether you think it's plausible or not, whether they can pull it off or not, they believe they can. They're working towards it. For the most Americans, this is happening in the dark. They don't have a clue. And strangely enough, you would think that some journalist would pop up and take advantage of this situation with Charlie Kirk and reveal some of this stuff. But it's available, but you have to piece it together yourself. So what I'm trying to do is piece it together all in one place. So they want to take over with their narrow slice of what they call Christianity, which is basically Christian supremacism, which is based on the idea of God rules, and then my pastor tells me what God says, and then I tell you what to do. That's how this works. Okay. Um, so the number one hill or mountain is government, education. They want to take over education. They will control education, not you. Okay, if you're Jewish, if you're agnostic, if you're a different kind of Christian, if you're Muslim, whatever you are, doesn't matter. They're going to run education. Okay. What else do they want to do? They want to take over the media. They're doing a pretty good job with Fox News. It's going to be a little harder with the other ones, but then they have their own media, by the way. You could live within this bubble of Christian supremacism and never have to. I mean, you'll have every television show you'd ever need, every radio show, every music channel, every book. You would never have to venture into the real world. It's a vast, 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 vast media environment. And if you ever traveled, you've been in a like a low budget motel on a Sunday, and you go try to you go through the cable, and it's all evangelical preachers, hustling for money. It means like like there's a lot of them. There's not like two or three of them, right? And that's just the TV ones, and then there's the local ones, and right. They want to control government, education, media. They want to control business, and they want to make the economics decisions. Hey, we don't think people should get food assistance because we've twisted a line in the Bible that says, you should be a bird and wait for God to just give you drop food from the sky by faith or something like. I mean, they twist the Bible every which way they can. Um, they want to control arts and entertainment. They want to control the family. They want to dictate family life. And they're doing this within their own sphere, but they want to expand this sphere to the entire nation. And they want to control religion. There will be only one religion, and that will be this apostolic religion in which your pastor is an apostle and a prophet, and you listen to him because God's telling him, and then nobody can say anything about anything else. Whatever that pastor happens to say, whatever that imperfect human and probably deeply corrupt pastor has to say becomes the law. It's a very neat system, right? If I say, hey, I got a direct relationship with God, right? And I'm telling you what you got to do. And one of the most important thing you got to do is give me money every week. I mean, this is such a transparent scam, but again, I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about these particular scam artists. Okay, so where did this idea come from? This is a 20th century, 21st century idea. They claim, these pastors claim that God gave them the same vision. So there's a bunch of them. They all got together and came out and said, hey, we were like in the light, and we all got the same vision from God. It must be true. And this is where the Seven Mountain Mandate came from. Um, and again, it's not just enough to influence. It's not just enough to mind your own business and work within your own family and community and faithful community of faith. Oh no. The whole world's got to get in line, and that's what they're working towards. Um, it's militant, obviously, and it has a lot of political involvement. And we're gonna show some videos there that you will understand the depth of this political involvement. I don't think the average person, unless they've had an opportunity to look into this, has any idea how deep this goes. All right, now, would you be surprised that behind all this is, for lack of a better word, corporate America? They are the funders of this stuff. And what does corporate America want? Well, they want to destroy labor unions, right? They don't like this idea of labor unions. They want to destroy the idea of regulation because regulation, it costs money. They want to obliterate the idea of being concerned about the health of the ecology. Now, I'm not talking about the debatable global warming thing. I'm talking about maybe we shouldn't be putting lead and arsenic into the air, which we continue to do now, and mercury. We're doing that right now. And if the global warming thing is really easy. Global warming is vague and general, and we can't do anything about it except wring our hands. And I don't know what are people doing? You get an electric car? Are you kidding me? Do you realize how much fossil fuel is consumed to create an electric car and to charge that car every day? Are you joking? If you think that's an improvement, that's a joke. That's a joke. But the thing that we could do something about is we could meticulously go through all the areas where there is actual serious pollution taking place. It still happens in this country, not the way it used to, but it still happens. And it certainly happens in the rest of the world. But we're not going after that anymore. We're only going after global warming. Do you see the scam? I could do a whole hour on that. But it's a lot easier to get people worried about this generic, general thing that nobody can do anything about than it is to say, hey, that company in that factory at that time is putting arsenic into the air. And that, by the way, burn coal, I don't know if you knew this, when you burn coal, you're putting arsenic, lead, and mercury into the air. That's a fact. Okay. It could be scrubbed. You could put something on it. In fact, you could even make money. They don't want to though. They don't want to. They don't want to extract the emissions and turn them into marketable items because they don't want to be told what to do. But that's the technology that exists. They just want to blow all that stuff into the air. Okay. So what's the point here? Would you be surprised that all these NAR Christian supremacists don't believe that government should have anything to do with regulating the environment? They don't believe that the labor union should exist. They don't believe that the disadvantaged should be helped. Right? I mean, they're literally adopting an anti-Christian view of life because their pastor said so, and their pastor is an apostle and a prophet and has a direct line to God, and it's the only way. And I'm saved, and all. Do you see the loop? It's not a very good loop. So, corporate America loves these people and funds them and supports them. It goes back to the 1930s, which was, we may go through this time again in the not too distant future, by the way, in which material comfort was shattered. People were hungry, people were homeless on a large scale, not just the sporadic. So it's not sporadic, by the way, it's millions of people. But right now, the vast majority of Americans are reasonably comfortable. That may and could end fairly soon. But anyway, it ended in the 1930s, and people were angry, and labor unions were militant, and a lot of stuff was going on. Um, and in Seattle, now Seattle had a really interesting position because there was always a bit of a labor shortage in Seattle, and therefore unionized workers had a little bit of a leg up, and they were succeeding very, very well, very, very well. And a guy named Abraham, I don't know how to pronounce this, Viridi, he in his endless quest to raise money, he found that rich industrialists were very happy to support his church as long as he did what? Speak against labor unions, speak against a socialist view of life. They liked the hierarchical nature of this guy's church. We don't want discussions. We want a boss that tells everybody what to do so that when we give that guy the line that we want distributed, he'll distribute the line for us. You see how valuable this is to industrialists and corporate entities, right? Um, and we want them to be politically conservative. So this man began his life in the 1930s as a pastor, getting all kinds of wealthy industrialists to support him financially. Uh, Now, he actually was sent after World War I to go and interview Nazis. And this is going to come up in the videos that we're going to show. There is an affinity between these authoritarian Christian supremacist groups and the Nazi attitude towards life and the Stalinist attitudes towards life and the Maoist attitude towards life. Now, this may seem crazy, but guess what? It's in their own documents. In their own documents, they praise the efficacy of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. Okay, so the people that have been forming this Seven Mountains, the Seven Mountains is a recent manifestation of this, but this goes all the way back to the 1930s. Deeply funded, deeply organized, thoroughly well conceived. We're going to get hold of these Christians through their pastors, and we're going to have the pastors teach their flock that no, you don't worry about the ecology. You don't worry about social justice. Okay? You worry about obedience. Or you don't worry about good working conditions. You don't worry about Gaza. You don't worry about anything. Here's the bottom line. You don't worry about anything the elites want. If the elite, this is literally their theology, guys. If you're elite, this is what it all boils down to. If you're elite, it's because God made you elite. And if God made that person elite, it's your job to obey him or her, period. Whatever they do, whatever they say. This is the core of their Christian religion. And I'm putting it in quotes because there's nothing about this in any Bible that I've ever seen. So we could go on and on about this, but I think I'll just do a wrap up. There is a thing called Christianity. there was a thing called the New Testament. The New Testament frequently talks about doing good to other people. And again, the one that sticks with me is whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. It's pretty clear. Pretty clear. You don't get to hierarchize human beings. You don't get to kick people when they're down. In fact, you do the opposite. That's my version of Christianity. Pardon me if I'm getting it wrong. Okay, but this version of Christianity is authoritarianism. You've got a pastor who is God, essentially godlike, God on earth. He's getting direct lines from Jesus. They're using the Lord's name in vain, not me. Okay. And here's the key. These people are deeply, profoundly supported organizationally and financially. Right. And we're going to now get into the videos that show you exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that, because I did a film where I just sort of strung these videos together and I showed them to some people and they didn't get it. And I'm like, okay, I guess I have to do this long introduction. So this is the long introduction. Now let's go piece by piece and back up what I'm saying. And again, this is their own words coming from their own mouths. Okay, this is not some conspiracy. Hey, you're imagining dark thing. No, 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 no. This is their agenda that they spell out. They shamelessly, and they're just trucking along. We're thinking that they're they're just kind of wacky people that watch religious TV and who knows what they're doing. Oh no, we better know what they're doing. And it's not the people so much; it's the leadership that is using psychological methods. And I didn't get into the fact that I did refer to the word brainwashing. These are classic brainwashing techniques. Okay, this is literal brainwashing. What they are doing in their so-called religious services is literally brainwashing. We're going to demonstrate that. And the whole purpose is to create a controlled flock so that when the elites tell the pastors what they want, the pastors tell the controlled flock what is now religious and sacred and what is not religious and sacred. And the Christian message is sort of irrelevant. You're just supposed to honor whoever God has made the authority. This is literally their religion. And it's, that's fine. If you want to have that religion, that's fine. But they are working very hard to impose this religion on all of us. So I'm just going to throw this out real quick. Kirk, talking against Israel, not a good idea. That's a multi-billion-dollar payday. Maybe $1 trillion, because you have to understand Israel being in control of the entire Middle East, and that adds up to trillions of dollars. So can't talk against that. That'll get you killed so fast, especially if you're a prominent person. And this is what I said 4 days after he was shot. Can't talk against the Ukraine support, because that's a multi-billion-dollar payday for many grifters. And again, one of the missions is to destroy Russia, and that's a multi-trillion-dollar enterprise. So if you talk about that, you're going to have a target on your back. But if you were brought up and raised up to function as a beacon for this Christian supremacist movement, and you're suddenly saying, well, maybe I'll be a traditional Catholic, which has none of this stuff, by the way. You just stepped on a lot of people's, not only their multi-billion-dollar paydays, you've stepped on a control mechanism, which I think I've already described pretty amply already. I think those three things, clearly enough to have people that do professional murders have him murdered. And by the way, this was a professional hit. No, he wasn't. He was not shot by Tyler Robinson from the top of that building. He was shot from the side. That's why he fell that way. So obvious, but you can get into the physiology. We've done a video about that. So that's sign number one that it was a hit. You have a distraction and the real shooter's somewhere else. That's professionalism. The second side that it was an official hit is the FBI. Just as the FBI did not do anything to find the killers of JFK or RFK or MLK or anybody else, it's on schedule. We have the FBI acting like the three-ring circus. Okay? This shows you it was a professional hit ordered at the highest levels of power. Now, I'm not saying any who exactly made the decision, okay? But somehow Kennedy got a bullet in the head, somehow Robert got a bullet in the head, somehow Martin Luther King got a bullet in the head, and they put a bullet in the head in this guy too. And by the way, they did it publicly, just like they did with John F. Kennedy, very, very publicly. So it's not just enough to kill him, you also have to send a clear message. So I think his interest in justice in Palestine, his interest in America first and not bankrupting our country, supporting some crazed thing going on in Ukraine, and his curiosity about traditional Catholicism, which was I think pretty advanced. There is a rumor, and it's just a rumor, that he actually was buried in a Catholic ceremony. Okay, that, as you'll see in a second, um, you cannot have the most highly elevated young person influencing tens of millions of young people step away from the Christian supremacist platform. You cannot afford that. That is a multi-billion, potentially multi-trillion dollar problem. And you will be killed if you do that. And that's probably what happened to him. All right, so let's look at the videos. And here we go.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.